Hey Josh.
Yeah, what's up?
I just need your help for an English assignment at school.
Yeah, sure. So, what's it about?
I have to write about. It's a narrative writing about school experiences.
Okay, that's a tough one. Hang on, let me see here. Oh, well, I've got an old clip of me and a couple of uni mates talking about our school experience. Let's see here. We talk about assimilation and just everyday life at school. Will that help?
What do you mean by assimilation?
Oh, okay. For example, you see these two women here?
Yep.
Well, they weren't actually born in Australia.
Okay, sure.
And you see that lady up the back?
Yeah.
Well, she did her schooling in London.
Okay, sure.
So they both have different experiences at school, and even myself and these two women across here, we all have different stories to tell.
So can we listen to what they said?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I'll start. Because I'm not born here, I had to move into a rural town, and what that meant was I had to adapt, like assimilate to a different culture when I was very little. We didn't know English at the time either, so I feel like the teachers had a lot of difficulty teaching us. I was placed in like the lower, like numeracy and literacy groups as well, because I just didn't know how to like teach me at the time. I had trouble with like social relationships as well, because it was a small tight-knit town, and they already had friends and they didn't really know who I was. There wasn't a lot of multicultural education at the time, so I had to kind of work hard to learn the social norms and the language and kind of adapt myself into it.
So similar to your experience, I also come from a different background. So when I first came to Australia, I went to a state school in Queensland, and it was quite different as well. So it was a lot of different cultures, not different like cultural norms and stuff. So it was quite like white Australian, and I was new, so everything was different. I didn't speak, so there's a language barrier because we couldn't speak English. So, and then understanding the cultures and the norms and stuff, it really wasn't there. So I kind of did experience difficulties with that, so navigating a new life. And I had pretty much like a different virtual school bag to everybody else. My experiences didn't match. I couldn't really relate to them on that level. And then also intercultural understanding was a big thing, so it really wasn't there. Like similar to you, like they couldn't really adapt to me and stuff, and I couldn't really relate to a lot of things and stuff. So yeah,
I feel like that's similar across all schools, and just the cultural awareness, bringing it into ATSI and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, because at my primary school we would acknowledge the owners of the land, past, present and emerging, so we could kind of help understand and allow the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders of our school and of our community to share their thoughts, their feelings, their religion, their culture, to give us a bigger understanding and help them assimilate with us and us them.
And you were saying that they were acknowledged all the time at your school assembly and stuff, whereas when I went to school in the 80s, we didn't acknowledge the Indigenous people at all. We didn't learn about them in history. It was all about white settlement and the First Fleet. That's all we learned about. And we did a token dot painting, and that's all we ever did. Yeah. And so now you're saying that
we had quite a lot on it. I feel like we had every assembly like yours, we like acknowledged the traditional owners, and then we had like reconciliation days, and in history we learnt like about it was more towards the end of school, about like Australia Day and whether it should be called like Invasion Day, not Australia Day, to like associate back to the Aboriginal people. But yeah, I reckon it's definitely changed now. We learn a lot more about it.
It's a good thing.
So,
yeah,
it's good.
Yeah, I'm totally horrified by what the education seems to know about the Aboriginal culture and the history, the total lack of history being taught in schools. So I went to school in England, and we learned about English history. That seemed like the normal thing to do, but then coming out to Australia, I just assumed that you would learn about your own history out here and not be learning about some random history from the other side of the world, and then just losing the most relevant recent history.
Sure. At my high school, we would have learning enhancement, so the kids that were intellectually disadvantaged, I like to call it, they were put into this LE program, so they were given extra help, and they had less requirements in maths and English and science and humanities and all the rest of it, and that was taken advantage by all the kids that didn't have that help, especially at home, so they could get that extra help, even though there were tutors in the library and stuff. But especially the kids that did have that learning disorder, and one of my mates that had mild dyslexia, he had to go there, and he was helped, and he was tutored 3 times a week in one-on-one sessions, and it really helped. So I believe that my high school had that.
Yeah, same.
I was just going to say, my high school had the opposite. We had accelerated programs, because often they worry a lot about the people that are struggling, but they forget about the people that are exceeding and that are very bored, and they become bored and they don't enjoy school anymore. So we had accelerated programs, and they worked really well. Yeah.
We had a mix of both. So like
We also had a mix.
yeah. So like instead of learning a language, they had like more help with learning English, and then with maths they would have like accelerated maths.
Oh, you're right.
I didn't have anything like that in my high school.
Really?
You know, I remember the girls that were really, really bright, and they would just cause trouble because, especially in maths, they were done in 10 minutes, and then they had nothing to do, and there were no advanced sheets or anything for them to do, and so they would just cause trouble.
Yeah, I could actually talk about our school with for like more study help kind of classes. It was more like a study hall based thing, so it wasn't like specified for subjects, but there's also like a like you look at the students differently even in class. Like if someone goes to study hall, you think of them as not as smart, so there's kind of like a little but when you see someone like a student who's doing 2 VCE units in year 10, you look at them differently. So it was a bit there's like a lot of contrast with them, so you wouldn't want to be a student going to study hall even though they do need it.
Yeah, I guess it's that power and social inequality that I had no reason not to fit in, but at primary school I didn't live in the village where the vast majority of the kids went to the village school, so I lived just outside the village, so I was kind of not accepted 100% by the children that way. And then I went to private girls' school, and then we didn't have enough money for my socio-economic capital to be on a par with the other girls, so I was always just not quite fitting in. Like I was there and it was okay, and the teachers were probably the teachers have that blasé attitude to, well, you can just afford that, it's just the expectation is that, so your family will provide that, which isn't always possible in families. And certainly when 90% of the class has something and has it the day that they're asked to have it, and you don't have it at that moment in time, or it's not going to happen because it's not something that your parents accept, I found that was something in my education that was challenging.
Sure, and just to compare with you with the whole fitting in thing, throughout my primary school and high school, I was never the popular kid, never in that higher social class that other people were in. But as soon as I was given the title in primary school of school captain, and in high school the role of house captain, I found that I assimilated into that kind of popularity group a lot more, because it was a popularity contest, especially in high school. It was a very heavily, okay, if you're sporty, if you're smart, if everyone loves you, you're going to get the role. But I was nothing like that. I wasn't sporty, I wasn't the smartest kid on the block, but somehow through how I upheld myself and how others saw me, I got the role. But in all the other houses, it was the whole popularity thing.
So I've had both issues in my schooling. When I first went to high school, I was prejudiced against from a lot of the teachers because my brother had a bad reputation. So the minute I got there, it was like, oh, you're a gidley. And yes, I spent a long time proving myself that I was not exactly like my brother. I actually got an apology from one teacher because, you have the same...
Similar to me, my sister, like she was always labelled as the naughty girl in her year level. So then when I went into the class, and from years 5 to 8, I had the exact same teachers as her. So we were always like, oh, another one of you. But then they realised that I wasn't, like I was completely different to her. And yeah, same, like a few teachers like, oh, like I didn't think I thought you'd be more like your sister, but you're not at all.
Yeah.
So, what do you think of that?
Well, I had no idea a group of people could have such different experiences at school.
Yeah, definitely. And what about these 2 women here?
Well, the 2 women who moved to Australia definitely had a different experience to the rest of you guys, not speaking English and therefore being disadvantaged.
Yeah, definitely. And what about these 2 women across that had the same kind of experiences with their older brothers?
Well, it was interesting to listen to their stories, as I too get referred to as your little brother, but I never get talked to as if I was your brother. Firstly, because I'm smarter and a better student.
Oh, yeah, calm down. So, what's next?
Well, I didn't really think about how an Aboriginal student may perceive schooling life, and that was really a shocking thing to hear.
Oh, definitely. So, what do you feel like doing now?
Well, probably better start writing. And now I might actually write from an Aboriginal person's perspective and do something different for once.
That's actually a pretty good idea, yeah.
Thanks, Josh.
No worries, mate.